we have experience where there have been other situations in our life where things have been chaotic, where things have felt overwhelming, and we've actually gotten through those moments.
For educational purposes only. What you read, hear, and see on the Autoimmune Hour, Understanding Autoimmune, and its websites, and other media outlets is based on experience only. The information should never be used for any legal, diagnostic, or treatment purposes.
Welcome, everyone, to the Autoimmune Hour. I'm Sharon Sayler from SharonSayler.com and, of course, from UnderstandingAutoimmune.com. And, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Dr. Charryse Johnson is back with us. She is the author of Expired Mindsets. I'm going to read the subtitle here, Releasing Patterns That No Longer Serve You. And I love it. We've interviewed, go back and look at UnderstandingAutoimmune.com, and you'll see that interview. It was fantastic. We've interviewed her a couple other times. I want to jump ahead, but I do want people to know who you are. I'm too excited. Just share a little bit about yourself and then we'll jump right in.
I'm a mental health therapist, a licensed clinical mental health therapist and mental health consultant. I have a private practice in Charlotte, North Carolina. I spend about half of my time seeing clients one-on-one, but as a mindfulness practitioner and consultant, then I also support a lot of businesses and organizations around how to navigate life and mental health, and really supporting the people who are working with other people, as well as authoring, keynote speaking, and then trying to create content that helps people understand really complex situations in a very simple manner.
Oh, goodness. See, I just knew the stars were aligning. So, I am so thrilled because what I want to talk about is stress from the outside. I keep hearing this, friends and family in the community keep talking about chaos, and somehow some of them, and sometimes I find myself trying to rationalize it or normalize it.
Yeah.
And actually it's creating more stress while me trying to do that. So let's talk about when we're surrounded by chaos and how do we maintain our sanity throughout?
Yes.
Probably we can't do that in an hour, but let's hit
Yeah,
that.
we'll tackle as much of it as we can. As you were talking, what came to mind, just so that we're level setting, is the dynamic of collective stress. And you can have stress that is specific to something that you're experiencing in your home or in an isolated situation. But when we talk about that whole dynamic of chaos, that starts to feel like something that is constantly around us. So collective stress from things that are happening to us, things that are happening around us, or things that are happening to people or people groups that we love and care about. For those that are listening to this, like in the moment, it's February 2025, collective stress and chaos would be appropriate terms for what many people have described their recent experiences. And what's so challenging a lot of times about stress is when it also comes so quickly, one right after the other. It doesn't give our body or our mind time to process it, to digest it, and to move through it. And so it really puts us in a very tight, hypervigilant state and can make us feel really bad physically or emotionally.
Oh, yes, absolutely. So, what are some tips first ourselves and dealing with the outside stresses? What are some of the things that we can do to calm our body down, both the brain and the
Yeah.
brain's reaction, as well as the body? Because in all my years of doing the Autoimmune Hour, the one thing I've learned is that stress is not really great for healing.
It
So,
is opposite of what we need for healing. We know that when we're taking in stress, for the most part, it's going to come in visually through what we see. It's going to come in auditorily through what we hear. So one of the first things I always recommend people to do is balance the level of information and stimulation that they're taking in. So one of the first things we want to do to help reduce our stress is really look at how can we reduce all of the notifications, all of the reading that we're doing. Sometimes we want information, but don't fully recognize how overwhelming that information is. So reduce that first. Another thing that can be helpful is then after you notice, okay, I've spent less time in things or listening to things that kind of heighten me, is to really do a body scan. And that essentially means you start at the top of your head and work through really just each part of your body, forehead, nose, cheeks. You can even find some of these on YouTube and really pay attention to what am I noticing in my body. And it's an amazing process for a lot of people. And they go, wow, I didn't realize how tight my chest felt. I didn't realize that my shoulders felt very tight and heavy, or my back. And our body will even tell us places that it's holding on to what we're feeling. So to start, and without taking up the whole hour right off the cuff, those are two really great things to do. So reduce your stimulation and then increase your self-awareness by doing something like a compassionate body scan.
Oh, I love those. And I love that you said balance and reduce,
Yes.
because I have several friends that no news, no, not just zoning out as far as sometimes it even takes them a while to get back to a text and saying good morning, something very plain and simple.
Yeah.
Because I tried that, to be honest, and I found it made me more stressed. It was that known, unknown kind of stress going back and forth.
Yeah.
So thank you for saying balance and reduce. That's
Mhm.
fantastic. And as we think about some of the tips for mindfulness and body scans,
Mhm.
what tips do you have for people when they say things like, you know what, I tried a body scan and the mind just started chattering away. I tried focusing on my forehead, and the only thing was my brain kept reminding me that there's a headache.
Yeah, it's a practice, right? I didn't say in any way, shape, or form that your mind would be perfectly beautiful and clear. So when
My
we
assumption.
yeah, no, that's an assumption for a lot of people. So I really love that you said that. Your mind, if you're overwhelmed, is going to feel like it's going a million miles an hour. It's going to feel chaotic. It's going to feel scattered. So part of mindfulness is non-judgment and curiosity. So that means, hey, let me come into this moment and just be curious about what comes up as I try this. What do I notice? Without judging what I notice. And maybe writing that down. I noticed that my mind, the first time I tried this, was all over the place and I couldn't get past the headache that I felt. And then you do it again. And then you start to notice, okay, I noticed that the thoughts were there, but they didn't feel like they were as much in the way. And the second time I was able to get halfway through my body and I could notice and pay attention. And then the third time, so it's a practice of checking in with yourself, not judging what you can or can't do, but just noticing what is, what am I noticing about my thoughts? And are those thoughts something that I want to further address because they're making me feel bad, or I notice that this is one thought that I'm getting stuck on, or it continues to come up in times that feel very inconvenient to me. So all information is great information. And if all you notice is that you have a headache, that's great. Honor that and then decide, how can I support myself in reducing this headache so that it doesn't get worse?
Fantastic. So now I'm thinking that I'm doing this practice with myself, but I'm also noticing family members, especially the kiddos,
Yeah.
feeling stress. And one of them isn't actually even old enough to name what it is, but just picking up on the energies, the dynamics around them. Do you have tips to help us help our younger family members
Yeah.
learn to be in a mindful state?
Yeah, don't underestimate how well younger family members can participate in a compassionate body scan. You can sit them down with you. We're doing a lot of research and study and practice about incorporating these kinds of things in schools and with young students so that by the time they are in middle school or high school, they're very familiar with the process. So you could absolutely have them sit down and say, okay, what do you notice in your head? What do you notice on your cheeks? They're fully aware of body parts. And they might go, oh, it feels weird there. Or if we voice, man, I noticed that in my shoulders feel really tight. And they might go, mine too. And even if they're not fully getting something out of it from a cognitive level, they are learning. They're learning a different way to pay attention to their body. So one of the best things that we can do is model for them. The other thing that can be really helpful for those that have young children is allowing them to draw or to color or play with them. And if you notice as you play with them and they create stories, let's write a story. What do you want to write a story about? They'll start telling you things that you're like, oh, well, that was an interesting story. What made you think of this? So just staying connected with them on their level having conversation with them, and then us appropriately saying things like, man, it's been a really tough day. I'm tired. Do you ever get tired when you have long days? So that they're learning the process of, here's what I'm feeling, and it's okay for me to communicate that as well.
My goodness. I'm just taking notes. I can't wait for the transcription because this is so helpful.
Yes.
As I was thinking about that and the young and helping the young people in my world, one of the things that came to me, though, I kept circling back. I find that I get into this circling thought process that is getting stuck again. And I
Yeah.
came back to the balance and reduce.
Mhm.
And then there was a part of me that said, well, I'm not even sure what it said. It was a moment of panic about that thought again, even though we had left that subject and moved on to other subjects.
Mhm.
It's interesting how my brain keeps cycling back to that. It's almost, okay, we're good. Now let's bring that back, that moment back to the forefront.
And I believe that's something that a lot of people experience. It can be along a spectrum. It can be we're overthinking a situation. It could also be to the point where we're ruminating on a situation, which is a little bit closer to what you described, where we have a specific thought that we feel like it is extending over and over again. That is a natural thing for the brain to do because the brain is trying to find resolve. So usually when we have a thought that continues to come, it's because it's unsettling, because we aren't sure what to do with that thought, or we're trying to convince ourselves, maybe if I think about it long enough and hard enough, I can figure something out. But most of the time, those thoughts are geared towards things that are completely out of our control. So when you find that you are feeling that way or you're noticing that thought, I think first we want to ask ourselves, is this a helpful thought or a hurtful thought or harmful thought? What do I notice about how I feel if I continue to think about this? Most of the time, we're going to say, yeah, this is a harmful thought because it makes me panicked. It makes me fearful. It makes me worried. So that's when we know I need to do something with this. And there's a number of different things that you can do. One of them would be write the thought down. And that's a way to move it out of the brain and to put it on paper. And that does lessen the emotional and the mental load of it. Then you can do things like cognitively reframe or challenge that thought, which means, is there a way that I can take that thought and still be very honest about it, but make it more neutral or positive so that thought doesn't have so much power? So let's say, for example, someone is thinking, I am worried about all the changes that are coming and how it may impact my job. And that's just something that's going on, but you can't necessarily foresee everything that's going to happen and all of those changes. So you could write that down. And then a way to make that neutral is something that I can do for myself is take a look at my finances and begin to pay attention to where I can be more frugal so that if a change comes, I have a good plan in place. So that makes us feel like, okay, I can do something with my situation. I can look at my finances. I can start to make sure that if I have things that I'm paying for that I'm not really using, that I can pull back. And that's a way of getting ahead, whatever potential changes are there. And if not, then I've saved up for a great vacation over time. But getting those thoughts out of your head, putting them on paper, and then writing some type of reframe that makes them more neutral or positive so that you feel like you have some choice is a very helpful way to manage them.
So the thought that came to my mind was about getting comfortable with those challenging thoughts or what my mind perceives as risky.
Okay. Tell me
And
what you mean by getting comfortable.
I like the idea of writing it down. I love to journal, so that one really resonated with me. And it was interesting. What can I do to make myself more comfortable with it
Mhm.
instead of trying to actually resolve it? For some reason, my body just liked the word like, okay, I can breathe if I can be comfortable with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So maybe comfortable is my word of the day.
Yeah, that is a great word. And it might be a helpful practice for everyone to decide, what do I need to do with this thought? In the world of psychology and therapy, we often talk to people about how do you sit with your emotions. And we don't just mean sit and freak out about all the emotions that you have, but it does mean if I have a thought and that thought is completely valid on what I'm feeling, how can I move towards a place of acceptance around this thought and that it is something that I have? Because a big part of what pushes the thought into a cycle of rumination is our fear around the thought or the story we're telling ourselves about our ability to manage that thought. So you have the specific thought. Part of getting comfortable, as you described, might be, what do I believe about my ability to manage this thought? Are there resources that I need that would be helpful to me as I sit with something specific? And am I giving this thought too much power? In the brain, we cannot choose every thought that comes to the surface. So, in the world of neuroscience, we will often communicate and help people understand when a thought comes up that is without our volition. However, every other thought after that's tied into that original thought is on us because we are fueling that thought by continuing to think about it. And that makes it stronger and more difficult for us to navigate. So we do want to find, again, the balance between, is this a thought that it will be important for me to be comfortable with because it's big and it's necessary and it's real? Or is this a thought that's more rooted in fear or insecurity or chaos that I actually want to work on just thought stopping and not giving it fuel? Because once I start giving it that fuel, it takes me to a place that isn't good for me.
Wow. Okay. Now, I just have to be honest,
Sure.
Dr. Charryse, when you said thought stopping, there was a definite inhale and holding of my breath. Oh, there was part of me that's such an action taker.
Yeah,
I wouldn't have been doing the show for 500 plus if not.
absolutely.
That part of me is obviously an action taker, that the idea that I could just stop a thought was a completely foreign idea to me.
It's an actual skill. Thought stopping is an actual skill where
You
we,
explain it because I'm baffled by, I'm sorry.
yeah, yeah.
Maybe I'm
So we have
naive, but
a
I'm
thought.
baffled by that.
Yeah, we have a thought that comes up that we don't like, and we increase the value of that thought because we fuel it. We stay there. We do choose to continue to think about it. We do choose to continue to pull in other information about it, but we actually do have the ability to go, I am not going to give that thought energy right now. Instead, I'm going to move my thoughts to another direction that is more helpful or more beneficial. Now, let me say, it is not easy to thought stop, especially when it's something that is new. You mentioned earlier, for example, that we sometimes, when we're feeling overwhelmed, just decide, I don't want any stimulation, I'm going to cut everything off. Essentially, that's thought stopping, just on a grander scale. I'm not going to allow anything to come at me that might make me think down a line of thought that I don't want to. So we do it selectively. It just is a coping mechanism, a lot of us, to get in our head and to overthink a situation. But just like we have the ability to think about it and think about it and think about it and think about it, we absolutely have the ability to go, this thought is hurting me. Continuing to place my mind on this thought is difficult. So I need to stop the thought when I become aware of it. And then I need to find another direction where I can place my mind or something that I can engage in doing so that I'm not ruminating and getting stuck on that thought.
It's interesting. A mentor from long ago, a quote that they used to use all the time came to my mind, and it to me, this is, I'm circling back, obviously, and apologize to the community for, because I'm stuck in a loop here, obviously. Where my mentor, business mentor, used to say years ago, a surprise is the enemy of competence. And at the point where the idea was to calculate out in your business all the, or as many as you could, possible options and ways that things could happen. And I think I've gotten stuck in that as a way of life now that you're bringing it up, because some of these thoughts about being able to stop a thought,
Mhm.
and I appreciate that you said that wasn't like stopping all thought. That was just
Correct.
that non-helpful thought. But I find that I might going, okay, am I opening up myself to surprise? And what I'm curious about in my own mind is, okay, obviously, or maybe I've been thinking about the word surprise the wrong way. All
Yeah.
these years after that mentor cemented that in there.
Yeah. That'll be something for you to just continue to explore. It's interesting. The brain doesn't actually love surprises. The brain loves certainty. And so part of our mindset and the time we spend constantly thinking about something is because we're trying to get comfortable. We're trying to be certain that we've thought through every single factor, but at the end of the day, we are always going to face things that are unexpected. And so, what can be more helpful is for us to remind ourselves we are capable of managing unexpected things. We are competent in it, even though they may be overwhelming and we don't want to manage them. We have experience where there have been other situations in our life where things have been chaotic, where things have felt overwhelming. And we've actually gotten through those moments, and reminding ourselves that because we know that we've gotten through some of these similar feelings in the past, we can bring that strength into this moment and use it to help us navigate what we're experiencing right now.
I love that. Thank you. I love that.
Yeah.
I want to switch gears a little bit and think it's tangential and going into expired mindsets
Mhm.
and how we can help expire those mindsets, because I see the parallel between my rumination and that there are a lot of mindsets in there that now just become apparent are not helpful at this point in time.
Mhm.
So first, I love your book, Expired Mindsets, and so I want to go back to that a bit. First, explain a little bit what is a mindset and
Sure.
your topic about how they can be expired.
In the way that I'm using the word mindset and in the general definition, it is core beliefs that we have accumulated over time, whether it's something that has been taught to us, shared with us, or through experiences that we've had. And as a result of those things, we have a specific mindset toward our ability to handle things, toward what we believe we think about ourselves or what we believe other people think about us. And then when I talk about mindset being expired, I'm really looking at the concept of there are certain mindsets that at the time were useful for us. It was all we knew to do or to think to get through it. But the problem is, we'll sometimes think that worked and now I need to keep doing it over and over again. And then we get into a new season of life and realize this isn't working anymore. It's not working as effectively, but we keep trying. So, in order for us to open our mind and our brain up to a new neural pathway and a new way of thinking, we really have to break up with the attachment that we have to that old mindset and go, okay, that was helpful at the time, but now hurtful. One of the examples that I use in the book is even in my own life. And I think about this was the mindset that I had as a single individual. And this helped me to navigate not having close, intimate relationships in my life. But then that kind of came to a head when I met my husband. I couldn't go into marriage with the same mentality that made me feel strong as a single person, because then that doesn't work very well with now we need to work together and there needs to be a level of compromise. So each season of life, each life change, sometimes a geographic change, sometimes an injury or a new diagnosis really faces us with what do I believe about myself? What is my mindset or my mentality? And is it something that I need to pivot or shift so that I can handle where I am right now in a better way?
We've talked about the idea of journaling and the body scan, which I love. What are some other things you can suggest for people to use in that can say, yes, Dr. Charryse, I totally agree that it's no longer serving me,
Mhm.
but they feel like, okay, there's a void.
Yeah, something that can be extremely helpful that I feel like still doesn't get enough acknowledgement is affirmations. And people hear the word affirmations and sometimes go to this, woo, it feels weird to be saying things to myself that don't feel real. But the brain doesn't fully distinguish between something that's fact and imagination. It believes what we repeatedly tell it. So when we're using language that is affirming, we are speaking into existence and we're working to believe something that we want to be true. So let's say that if we're in a situation where we've just recently been diagnosed with an autoimmune challenge, and we are overwhelmed with the changes that we may need to make to how we eat to help reduce inflammation. If our mindset is, I will never be able to give up these things, that creates fear, that creates anxiety, that makes us feel like there's a fear of failure. So one of the things that we might affirm in ourselves is, I am capable of making the changes that I need to one step at a time. And so we're just using language that makes us feel hopeful and not like we have to do it all cold turkey. But we want to tell ourselves that affirmative language every day. So a daily practice could look like, if there's something that you want to start believing and start thinking that helps challenge your former mindset, is you take 1 to 2 minutes a day. Doesn't take a lot of time. You can do it multiple times a day if you want to. And you write it down. That's the first step, is I'm just writing that over and over, reading it. The next step in me being comfortable with that is me saying it out loud. I am capable of making these changes one step at a time. And then step 3, because each level is a little bit different in comfort, would be looking at myself in the mirror, in the eyes, and saying, I am capable of making these changes one step at a time. And the more we say that to our brain, we're creating neuroplasticity. We're opening up a pathway where now when we're plating food, we're not automatically thinking the old thought. We're reminding ourselves, one choice, one decision at a time, I can make the changes that are ultimately going to make me feel better. And it only takes me a few minutes a day over several days before I start to believe in what's possible.
I'm curious, when we were talking about the affirmation, there was a little child in me that sort of said, but what if it wasn't about the topic of affirmations, it was about the specific affirmation about changing in food.
Yeah.
The little child stomped it, but just said, I don't want to.
Yeah.
So
Very true.
that was interesting to me inside when I heard that. I know full well that there are specific foods that my body just find as a comfort food. And when it's upset, that's what it wants. And somehow it stomps its foot and that's what it wants.
Yes. That is a very real dynamic and behavioral change. What I encourage if someone is in that place is, maybe the things that you are going to affirm are geared towards a desire. I don't want to give this up, but I do know it will make me feel better. Right. So you still just find a way to be very honest about, this is hard. I really enjoy this. I don't want to. I was in my 30s when I was finally diagnosed with celiac. And that was extremely challenging after spending so much time not feeling well, but also telling myself that I could eat whatever I wanted to. And there was absolutely a part of me that was kicking and screaming, thinking about all the things that I wouldn't be able to have, or if I did have them, it wouldn't be the same. So there's also a grieving process when it comes to letting go of our attachment to mindsets that might be attached to comforts that we have, because even the mindsets that are challenging for us, there's also a comfort in them, because we've said these things to ourselves, or because we've eaten these specific things. It's our fallback. When I'm working with someone who is navigating changes to what they eat and they're in the place of, I don't want to, I go, okay, well, of course, no one is forcing you. And an important part of change is choice, is that you get to decide when and you get to decide how much. So let's be curious. As you move forward in life and you decide, I'm having a stressful day and I want this particular thing that I know is comforting, but also not great for me, you decide, have it. But what I want you to do after you have it is, I want you to take a moment and really notice, did this support me the way I thought it would? And a lot of times people then realize, I'm kicking and screaming because I have a mental attachment to this food. But if I paid attention right after I ate it, I had a headache. my stomach wasn't great. My blood sugar reacted. I broke out in hives and a number of different things. And then over time, we go, I'm ready to let this go because it's not worth it anymore. What I have to do to get myself back to a place where I feel good isn't worth it. None of these changes that we're talking about are meant to be overnight. They're meant to be a practice. They're meant to be something that we approach. They're meant to be something that we do through the lens of compassion. So you don't beat yourself up because you had a hard day and you want a mound of chocolate. You eat as much of the chocolate as you desire and then notice, okay, was it really worth it? And did it really help me the way I told myself it was going to when I first started?
Absolutely. Also, a nice support mechanism, though, is if you can get family members to agree not to have it in the house.
Yeah.
With regards to certain things, I too have celiac problems. Unspoken rule is don't make toast when Sharon's around. Because it's the smell, the memories. It's funny about the smell of toast, the memories that flood back, and it's crazy that
Yeah.
it's not just the sight of it or the thought of it. There's certain triggers around it too.
We are very attached to memories around food, and that's why we struggle to give up a lot of them. Very much. That's very real. And yes, if you're in a house where the people around you will agree to do that, especially in the beginning of any change that you're making, it's really helpful. And then eventually we do have to figure it out because we're going to go to some conference or we're going to go to some vacation and that smell is going to be there. But at least by then, hopefully, we've built up enough muscle to make it through, but it's not easy. There's still things that I see that I know, oh, I know what that tastes like, but I also know how I feel afterwards, benefit versus cost.
Absolutely. And it reminds me of this crazy story. When I used to work at a particular location, I had to drive by one of the city's largest bakeries, and
Mhm.
it always smelled wonderful.
Yeah.
Just driving through that neighborhood was like fresh baked bread smell.
Yes. Oh, I
I
can
found
smell
the
it
only
now.
way to combat that was because it was a daily thing driving through the smell. I found the only way to combat that was like drive 2 extra miles a different way.
Yes, that's what you need to do. Sometimes that's what it takes.
It was crazy how those, I don't know, maybe it's just me and smells, but that was crazy when I was thinking about how reactive I was to
Yeah.
smells of certain foods and all the thoughts that came rolling back.
Typically, if we talk about our relationship with food, we organize that through our senses. So it is going to be, we either, for some people, they're highly organized by smelling it, and then that's what makes them want it. For others, it's sight. They're fine unless they see it. And then if they see it, it's really difficult. So we all go one way or the other. And then sometimes it's a perfect combination of both. And then you add a memory onto that layer. That is why a lot of us get stuck in certain eating patterns because it's very hard to break out of those strong sensory comforts that come from that. And so when it smells good and we see it and we remember the texture and the heft of it, those are the things that make it really hard for us to make choices. Trying to back away from being saturated by those moments can be really good for us.
Oh my goodness. I want to be mindful of our time. And what are the questions haven't I asked that you find out there in your work that are really pressing that people should be aware of?
The primary questions that I am listening to and getting are around loneliness and around fear of uncertainty and change. That seems to be the two big spaces. A lot of individuals have recently experienced different loss, and it doesn't even just mean loss of a person. Loneliness can be loss of a relationship, and that could be a job relationship, that could be a pet relationship, that could be a friendship, and how to navigate when you had something that is no longer there and you don't know how to get it back, or if it didn't end well, you're not sure if you want to, but you also really miss having that particular piece in life. And then there's a lot of fear around uncertainty and change because individuals, organizations are not feeling settled and they're overwhelmed by the amount of potential change and not feeling like there's anything that they can do. And so then we're just having a lot of conversation around how do you stay grounded and how can you anchor yourself. I did a reflection for a group of people this morning, and the reflection was around when is the last time you remember truly feeling at peace? And just giving yourself a moment to think back to, okay, yeah, where was I? How long ago was that? What was I doing? And then the next thing I encouraged them to do was to consider how can you recreate part of that in your life this week. So it's going to be really helpful for us to be very intentional about who we spend time with, how we spend our time, and making sure that we're doing things that bring us joy and that create dopamine and help settle our nervous system so that we can navigate everything that we're feeling in this collective stress that we're all taking in.
Interesting you asked that question about when remembering the help bring you to peace. It was interesting. I felt, I'm not even sure, I can't consciously conjure up what memory that was. But there was a whole letting down of my shoulders. I felt my whole body just take a huge inhale, exhale, relaxing exhale, and sink into it.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure. It was just the question itself. Obviously, the unconscious mind tapped into whatever that was without bringing it to the forefront. But that was
Yeah.
amazing question.
Yeah. And that was ideally the goal. So, yeah, if we can't remember the exact moment, we know the feeling and we know, oh, but I know what peace feels like. And I know if I'm in that right now and if I'm not, and how can I bring some of that in? Is that a warm blanket? Is that a soft texture? Is that a great cup of tea before I go to bed at night? Is that spending time in quiet with low light or the scent of a candle? And so it's just reminding us to bring things in that just add to that sensory piece and that mental piece that we really need in order to be our best selves.
I love that. I want to practice asking myself that question about peace multiple times throughout the day just to remind my body what the feeling is. I felt a massive relaxation with that.
Yeah.
So obviously I have been a little pent up.
Your body was like, okay, yes, we need.
Exactly. Just an outside reminder, like Dr. Charryse said, what's peace feel like? And that was pretty amazing to me.
Oh, I love that for you.
Oh, wow. So I got to write that one down for sure. I write all these things down, but that one I'm going to underline and circle. So I wanted to circle back about loneliness. I do find that a lot of my friends are commenting as they age that finding friends becomes harder and harder. And it's fascinating to me what the combination between proactive, what are you doing? Are you reaching out? Because I
Yeah.
found in the pandemic, a lot of people just dropped out of the line of conversation or not even obviously the line of sight if you're both in different locations. But
Yeah.
I found it for me, just thinking about, I wonder whatever happened to, and then reaching out to them and saying, hey, let's at least at a minimum have a quick chat.
A lot of people did back away and really get out of practice during the pandemic, but we're also noticing that those same individuals, many of them have not reconnected to that social practice and they're feeling it. It's really interesting in the work that I do around loneliness with individuals. We'll identify what's missing. We will definitely acknowledge that in order for you to have friends, that will mean that you need to leave the house. They're not going to come to your door. But so many people talk about feeling less approachable, less confident. And again, it gets back to that organization around there are certain feelings that we have when we're in new situations and we're approaching people, and we were more accustomed to that pre-pandemic. So people are so comfortable that they're like, I'm lonely and I want these close connections. But then the thought of getting back to a place where I put myself out there can feel like too much, but it is really important and really necessary. And I think the challenge as we age isn't so much that friends aren't available, we're comfortable and we want those close
Bingo.
relationships, but we don't want to be uncomfortable to get them. We don't want to do anything outside of our typical weekly movements, but it usually takes placing yourself into some new settings in order for you to gain some new friendships that are fitting to where you are right now.
It's funny that I think my subtopic through this whole thing is comfortable.
Yeah.
The multiple ways Sharon chooses to be comfortable.
Yes. If we're also feeling chaos, then we want comfort. That makes complete sense because that makes us feel safe.
Oh my goodness. My
Yeah.
goodness. Well, we're down to about the last 8 minutes or so here. Let's a little talk about a couple other ways, if you have them, for people to feel safe or help others feel safe. And then definitely talk about your books, because I really want people to know. And if you have anything upcoming to share with us too.
Sure. So I would say the last way that I would mention around the dynamic of feeling safe and comfortable is who you're around. So being in connection with people that you align with, that you feel like are safe people in your life is extremely important. Even if those people don't live near you, we are not spending enough time in community. And as a result of that, that also adds to some of the feelings that we have, or that allows us to be off by ourselves and in our head because we're not having conversations with trusted individuals that help ground us and remind us, like, oh, I'm not the only person going through this. So talking, communicating, and sharing with other safe people is another way that you can support yourself. Or if you're like, I don't really need to talk about any of the things I'm experiencing anymore, I just need to induce positive enjoyment, then you being intentional about getting with other people and going, hey, would you love to go for a walk? Or there's a new exhibit or something that's coming out, and I would love for somebody to go with. We really just need experiences in connection, having fun, and to give our brain a break. When it comes to the books, yes, there's Expired Mindsets. There's Get Off the Scale and Heal, which really focuses on our relationship with food and recognizing when we're being too rigid, or how historical trauma or narratives that we've believed about our body over time may be impacting our body image and how we are showing up with food. I also have an ebook called Embrace 28 Days of Self-Love. And this is just a beautiful, simple ebook if you're in a place that you feel, I don't know that I'm being really compassionate to myself right now. The way I'm talking to myself isn't as kind as I would like it to be. And so each day has a simple quote or affirmation. And then at the back of the ebook is like a bingo board, so to speak, with different ways that you can engage with yourself to show self-love, which can be really helpful. And then I have a journal called Mindset Matters. Mindset Matters is a journal that's focused on, if you're trying to put together a daily and weekly practice that helps you make the shifts and changes that you need, that's very simple. It's based on the 5-on-5 system of success, which kind of pours you through 5 different ways that we know from neuroscience and cognitive behavioral therapy help the brain and the body move into a new rhythm. And you can find all of those on Amazon.
Absolutely. And I want to encourage everyone to follow Dr. Charryse on Instagram. She has a very dynamic community over there. and she always has a lot of interaction going on in her community. I think it's one of the more powerful Instagram communities I'm a member of. So I want to give you a shout out to join her Instagram community too. I don't remember, I've been following you for a while, so I don't remember your.
Oh, yes. So
Find you
it's
there.
Dr.Charryse_J. And Charryse is Charrryse. And yes, it's a lot of fun.
Absolutely. So everyone, that's Dr. Charryse Johnson. Thank you so much for coming today. It was spot on, exactly what I needed to hear, because I just been feeling overwhelmed by a lot of chaos that personally I thought it was from the outside. And what do I do once it's in? So I'm
Yeah.
going to take to heart so many of these, and I can't wait to read the transcript as well and do some underlining, because you know me and my journals. So.
That's a good thing. Thank you so much for having me. This was such an important conversation.
Absolutely. And Dr. Charryse, you're welcome back anytime, because our community just loves your voice of sanity. It's really
Oh,
important these days.
yeah.
So everyone, that's Dr. Charryse Johnson. You can find more about her at drcharrysejohnson.com, right? So that's
DrCharryse.com.
Oh, drcharryse.com. Okay, I'll put that in the description as well for you guys so you can find it, because it's a great website that has lots of offerings there as well. So everyone, have a great week, whatever your adventures. I'm going to talk about it, turn a little bit here about staying calm this week and finding our own inner peace. That's going to be my thing for this week and beyond. So share in the comments how you're finding your own inner peace. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe. It helps grow our community and gets out words like Dr. Charryse to a larger community. And that's what we all need right now. So everyone, have a great week. As I said, enjoy your adventures and join me next week for another brand new episode. Enjoy.
The information provided on the Autoimmune Hour, Understanding Autoimmune, and Life Interrupted Radio, including the websites understandingautoimmune.com and lifeinterruptedradio.com, plus social media, is for educational purposes only. What you read, hear, and see on the Autoimmune Hour, Understanding Autoimmune, and Life Interrupted Radio, and its websites, and other media outlets is based on experience only. The information should never be used for any legal, diagnostic, or treatment purposes.